We all are living at probably the most exciting, terrifying time in history. It's the biggest change for humanity since, well, basically the Industrial Revolution, except that took years. It took nearly 100 years to evolve. We're the first time this species has been aware and conscious that we have to make this mega change. And this is called the two loops diagram. On the left is the pattern. Everything now is learning about patterns. We see an old way of doing things, an old way of seeing things in decline. It's reached its zenith and it's now unraveling. And if you live in the UK, you can see unraveling on the telly every night. So something is dying in a sense, but at the same time, something new, this is the evolutionary process, is being born. It's not fully formed yet. We don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, except we do know our thoughts and our actions are shaping that future. The future is created here and now, the seeds of the new way of being on the planet. So that little sort of whirlwind in the middle with the words VUCA, this is a word that was introduced by actually the American military about 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. And it's an acronym for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. This is the world we're living in. And therefore, we cannot fall back on just doing the way things were done before. So I'm going to make 4 points, just so you can memorize these or reflect on these. And if you want to have a nap, maybe last night was a bit, late, you'll know what I'm going to say. Basically, we have, sadly, used up all the time we had for what we call incremental change. We now have to make fundamental changes to the systems that we use on this planet. It's systems change or nothing. Secondly, we'll only be effective in that change when we understand that we're not actually an industry. You'll hear that word over and over and over again. We're a tourism industry. The leaders of the tourism industry like to project that image because it gives you a sense of control, that somehow we can direct it. But in actual fact, we are a living networked system. We're a network, a collection of individual people. Every single one of us plays our part in this. And again, the only way we'll be effective in change is if we understand how networks work. The third point is that I believe tourism, and especially the hospitality element of tourism, which is its core, and every part of, even the airlines, essentially extend a degree of hospitality, unless it's a low-cost airline flying out of Barcelona, but that's another point. We have a unique role and a responsibility to play in helping that new, better system emerge. But to do so, we have to rediscover and go back to our original purpose of hospitality, of caring. And the fourth point I want to make is that to start, we have to really focus on redefining success. The way that we define it, learn from the natural world how success really should be. It's not growing as in getting bigger, but it is growing as in developing, as in evolving, as in developing more quality, more beauty, more complexity. So those are the 4 key points. You can relax now if you wish. The rest is entertainment. Okay, what kind of change do we need? And this is what I've been working on for the last 10 years, basically. And again, I've given you in these slides links, just so you can see how the thinking was developed. I can't cover everything in 30 minutes. But I started out looking at our fundamental operating model, and there's a paper you can link to there. That led to this report, a lot longer, 70,000 words. And more recently, I started to put out what regeneration was all about. So it's been a process of learning for me, and a sort of development of thinking, and I'm not the only one. but I wanted you to see the journey that I had been taking. Oops, now we've got a problem because I don't know how to go back with this click. So I'm so sorry. I might need help. Oh, okay. I have it.
Backwards, yeah?
All right. That didn't work before, so.
Yeah, now it does.
Okay,
No,
super. Thank you.
You're on the
Okay. Okay, the context for all that learning was basically we have enjoyed, up until the pandemic, 10 continuous years of getting bigger, all right? And we were considered very successful. So when I started, not started out, but during this process, we had this phenomenon of over-tourism. The picture on the left is Los Ramblos in Barcelona, where the residents at some point took to the streets and really protested and changed the government, actually, as a result of their frustration and anger with just too many people in their city. The picture on the right is Venice. So you could say this is what real success in the old model looks like. We're just full of tourists, isn't it great, all right? But if you have, it's like anything alive. 1 glass of wine's good, 2 glasses of wine are better, a whole bottle and a half one evening, not so good. So you cannot continually have more, all right, and feel really good about that. So, seeing the flaws in the system, which is really where I focused my attention, is why is it breaking down? Why is it unraveling? I had a chance to speak to the CEOs of the European Travel Commission in February of 2019, and I thought, well, this is my make or break moment, okay? So I summoned up my courage, and I started off my presentation by saying this, for the benefit of those at the back. Global tourism, as currently practiced, is underperforming, highly vulnerable, and heading towards a breakdown. Its operating model is no longer fit for purpose and needs to be replaced. Well, what do you think the reaction was? Stunned silence. Okay, but nevertheless, we did manage to make our point that. But I felt I had to say that because there was a lot of denial at the time that over-tourism was happening or it was even a problem. There was a sense of invincibility. Now, I had no way of knowing, this was February of 2019, what actually would demonstrate our vulnerability. And of course, we know what happened then. A pesky little microbe did far more than any PowerPoint presentation could do. It put us on our knees, basically. And I find these two charts really interesting when you put them side by side. The chart on the left shows how we had systematically grown and grown and grown until the early part of 2020, when we were pushed back onto our knees. We went right back to the same volume that we had had back in 1990. That was a really significant hit. At the same time, if you look at the graph on the right, that is a graph of emissions, and the dotted green line going down shows the path that we have to take if we're going to reduce the amount of carbon in the air and maintain the temperature of the Earth at a level that we can live in and that we can enjoy a prosperous tourism sector. So, lockdown, nature starts to reappear in our cities. I think the dolphins even came into the Bay of Kotor during that period. And there were a lot of good intentions. We saw this was an article from Forbes on the left. It's time to rethink the tourism industry. They had never paid any attention to tourism before, but they said in this article we were totally unsustainable anyway, as if everyone knew that. We had statements like this: we have to build back tourism better. But how quickly we forget. I discovered this while preparing for today. I hadn't seen it. But the WTTC earlier this year forecast that by 2023 we'll be back to the same level we were at in 2019. And we're projected to grow at a rate of 5.8% from 2022, this year, right the way through to 2032. Sounds great, doesn't it? All right? You with me? But this is a lesson in cognitive dissonance, if you know what that means, when you've got two irreconcilable ideas side by side, which humans are perfectly capable of carrying in their heads. The number of, if you understand the math, if you grow at nearly 6% per year, every year, we are going to double the size of tourism on this planet by 2034. Double it. At the same time, we're being asked to halve the CO2 emissions. Problem. Big gap, right? Now, one thing I want you to bear in mind, when I'm talking right now, I'm talking about the global picture. I am not saying that there is not room for growth in different parts of the world. What I am going to be saying is that we can define growth, we can measure it differently in a way that still enables us to reduce our impact. So in Montenegro, you're coming into this game, if you like, a little later than some places. There is undoubtedly probably room for growth. But what you're also starting to experience is that growth, that numbers are in a very short window, like July and August. Everyone says, come here, but don't come in August, right? So what we have to do is flatten that curve. It's a bit like the messages we had with COVID, flatten the curve. So you and WTO are equally pugnacious, saying tourism is back, but they're not talking about so much what they're going to do when we come back to that level. So the original model for tourism, because it is an extractive industrial model that we're using, says success is more people because that means more spending, more business, more jobs, not necessarily always good jobs, but more jobs, more taxes, and that means more gross domestic product, which means more well-being. But does it? All of the evidence shows that GDP can go up, but well-being can go down. And that, in fact, is what's happening in nearly all Western countries right now. So, as Robert Kennedy said, and this would have been 40 years ago, GDP measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. That's why I'm saying we have to redefine success as contributing to the well-being and the flourishing and the thriving of places where we operate. So in the meantime, what's happened? Well, the wicked problems have got worse, whether it's climate change, biodiversity loss, and all the manifestations of that. The risks have escalated. And these, by the way, are not necessarily what we should focus on. These are not the problems. These are the symptoms of a deeper problem. Hang on. It's stuck again. We know about global warming enough. But the global, what we don't appreciate perhaps is those that are in charge of measuring things like risk. This is the global risk assessment. They're getting almost hysterical, as are the climate scientists, as are the biodiversity specialists. We're on a spiral of self-destruction. Has this idea got through to most of us? We know that the global temperature is rising and we have a sixth mass extinction. Now, I'm not going to dwell very long on doom and gloom because the whole purpose of this presentation is to show us how to change. But unless we carry these ideas around in our head, unless we appreciate the urgency, then we're not going to make it. And in our panic, we've got to do something. That's the normal reaction to a problem. We've got to fix it. We've got to do something. We have lots of solutions. So even in the short time I've been studying this, we have the triple bottom line. That lasted a few years until the author of that, the creator of that idea, recanted and said doesn't work. Then we have the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Great idea, except that what we've done is divided the problems into boxes, and you can pick and choose like a pick and mix at the store which one you want to work on, but no one has understood the relationship to any of the others. So you might have a fantastic solution for number 9 and it ruins the chances of number 17 succeeding. Okay? There's the circular economy, really good stuff, but it's mostly towards the manufacture and distribution of things. The donut economy, that is fantastic. It's about how do we create well-being in the community and life while living within planetary boundaries. And now we have in tourism people cherry-picking things like everything has to be community-based all of a sudden, and now we're moving on to nature-based, all right? So it's hard to keep up with it, and I'm not going to pretend we can. Okay, it sticks. What I am going to say is that we need now to get to the root cause of these symptoms, these problems. And that is to really ask yourself why, what is it about the way we see the world that is perhaps at fault? And this is where our good friend Albert Einstein, everyone quotes him all the time, the world we've created is a product of our thinking. Until we change the way we think, the way we see ourselves, our relationship with each other, our relationship with the natural world, we can't solve a problem because we'll be using that old consciousness. And one of the things you will start to see is just how pervasive that old consciousness is. It pops up when people ask me, define regeneration, define sustainability, and tell me the difference between the two. That is very much an old way of thinking, needing to define the problem before you can solve it. He said we really need to see the world differently, and the root cause is actually a crisis in perception. Now, another very, very bright, intelligent man called Gregory Bateson was an ecologist in the 1940s. He said the major problem that we have right now, all of those symptoms express the fact that we're not thinking or working the way that the natural world thinks. We've cut ourselves off. We're separate from it. We talk about the environment as an it over there. We can manipulate it. It is a problem. We have to fix it. When in actual fact, the truth of the matter is, we're as much part of nature as the animals and plants and the ocean that you can see outside the window. We have to learn now to be our true nature. And there's 4 shifts. I mean, marketing people like to know what the drivers are, and I'll go through them very quickly, that are forcing us to change, whether we are aware of it or not. The first is science. And again, we could spend hours on this, and it's fascinating if you're inclined. But there are, some major ideas coming from quantum physics, neuroscience, biomimicry, living systems, economics, you name it, all are saying now the same thing, that we are not separate and we have to learn to see ourselves as integral to nature, that we are not parts of a dead machine. My body is not a machine. My company is not a machine. My community is not a machine that I can manipulate with inputs and outputs. It's an integral part of a living system. We have living systems within living systems within living systems, and living systems do not work like machines. Thank God, because they don't run down, they run up, if you follow me. So we need to start to look at nature. How does nature organize itself? How does nature exchange information? How does nature cooperate? What can we learn? And there's a whole body of knowledge that's only appeared in the last little while to tell us that. The third shift is that people are changing. As we mature, as we grow older, and as we grow older as a community, our values do shift from just wanting to survive, to wanting to look after the family, the relationship, to starting to want to grow. Every one of you, I bet, is going through that transformation period. It's natural. And our younger people are going through it much faster. In fact, many people think that the young generation that's being born today is almost born with the level 4 consciousness, which is great, because we need that. And you can see this if in more and more emphasis placed on purpose, on meaning, on our customers not wanting to just be pushed around. This lovely picture, I'm not a brand and you are not the crowd. I'm an active individual, I have agency, I want to use it, I want to participate, I want to get involved in local solutions. Many of you in this room are of that mind and are doing that. And if you want just purely tourism stuff, then there's tons of evidence that our consumers are maybe ahead of us now in wanting to work with companies, stay with companies that's showing that they care and they're sustainable and they're responsible. And the fourth feature of this is that we tend now not to trust the news, the brand information. Who do we trust? We trust each other. And that's why social media is so influential. And all of this has resulted in a change in the role and purpose of business. It started over 10, 12 years ago, but people like Marjorie Kelly asked, she was very much involved in the financial community. She said, you don't start with the corporation, the company, and ask how to redesign it. You start with life, with human life of the planet, and say, how do we create the conditions for life to flourish? And I say this now because what we're talking about with regeneration, it's about life-affirming activity. Paul Polman, who was the chairman of Unilever, really paved the way in the corporate world with the idea that the purpose of business was not to make a profit, actually. It was to contribute to the social well-being of the community as a whole. And he argues very persuasively that, okay, 3 minutes, I got the yellow card, that, that you can, in fact, make more money, more profit, and again, I can give you all kinds of evidence of this, if you put the purpose as something other than that, if it's higher. So change is happening on the outside. This is a diagram basically designed to show how we are moving from conventional extractive business based on this mechanical model. We started then to become green and try and do less harm. We're now in the sustainability, as Vicky said, even at the world travel market, and our sector's been behind the others. People are recognizing that they have to think about how they are going to put into effect sustainable practices that reduce their impact. We're on our way to the next phase, but we're not there yet. And this requires a fundamental shift in our mindset. So in the early stages, we think, okay, we can carry on business as usual. This is the left. Let's see if I can. This is over here. So we can be less harmful. We can reduce the risk. We can try even to move that up and say we will do no harm. We will be net zero. And next phase in that now is we are going to start to do good. We are going to repair and replenish, repair the damage we've done. This is where net positive goes. The challenge with that is it's still the old system. It's still based on the values and assumptions of the old extractive system that sees us as separate. If we're going to make the shift and live in harmony with the natural world and come back into balance, we're going to have to change our minds and do the work it takes to do that, which is inner work, development work, and a shift in our understanding. So to regenerate simply means to give new life or energy or to revitalize, and that's why I titled this presentation, Back to Life. And instead of fixing nature or acting on nature or cleaning up nature or any of this, we start to learn how nature works and partner with her to realize the full potential of the place we live in. So if you can bear in mind, because I know I've only got 1 more minute, we have to create the fertile conditions for life to thrive and evolve. I'm not saying, by the way, that this is easy. Later on in the workshop, we'll do a little exercise of using our imagination to see how we might do that. And that's what I invite you to do, is stretch your minds. The key thing is that we, instead of serving just ourselves and our sector, and as tourism saying, what are you going to do for us? Are you going to give us more money to promote for more visitors? We're going to ask the question, how can we contribute to this place thriving? But to do that, we need to live by nature's rules, and we can learn them, thank goodness. But only this will generate systems change.